The challenge that I think a lot of the industry has right now is there isn't an agreed upon standard for storing in Git history, like what was written by AI or not. And at a high level, what we've seen is engineers are generating or are changing about 70% more lines of code per week than what we saw at the end of 2023. So we think a lot of that should largely be attributable to AI.
So in this context now, you can interact with the LLMs through Graphite. You can interact with the Graphite agent to edit the code within the PR. And you've sort of seen a bunch of Claude and others introduce maybe review elements, and you're kind of encroaching into that space. How do you see the boundaries or the right scope of a product?
I could see a world where Graph isn't necessarily like building a first-party review agent. Our goal is very much to be like the interface layer and the best place to interact with and control many different agents working on your code changes. I also think then there's another opportunity to be the control plane for all of those agents, and that is really where I think we see the most opportunity.
If AI is doing the review, I think I would want to consume that review as part of my ongoing development as opposed to wait until I publish a PR. Why do I need to wait until I open the pull request?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the AI Native Dev. Thanks for tuning back in. Today, we're going to review everything about review and code review. And to dig into that, we have the CEO and co-founder of Graphite, Merrill Lutsky. Merrill, thanks for coming on and joining us here on the show.
Thanks for having me, Guy.
Let me say a couple of words about Graphite and do kind of keep me honest here if I misrepresent.
Yeah.
So you've been around a bunch of years. Your kind of core innovation has been on code review, but like human code review before, right? You had this smart insight and great tooling that allowed these sort of stacked PRs where you can create a snippet of your work and start sharing it and get reviews as you build those out. And that's been great. My team here at Tessl has been using it, loving it. And that was kind of a great innovation. Then AI came along, and you've been leaning much more heavily into AI code review now, and your reviewer there, Diamond. And so let's maybe start from just understanding a little bit more about what it is that you do in that sort of AI code review.
From the beginning, we've been focused on the problem of code review and how we unblock the outer loop and kind of the second half of the story of what happens once a PR is ready, is like finished and complete or ready to be reviewed. There's still so much work that needs to happen to get that from like that first draft of the PR out to production. And we started from taking inspiration from companies like Google and Meta that have built amazing internal tooling and great workflows to help tens of thousands of engineers coordinate across different time zones and be able to ship as quickly as those companies do. So from the beginning, we were focused on how do we unblock the outer loop, like accelerate code review, taking more of like a workflow and tooling approach to that. Stack PRs was the main innovation that we were borrowing there. Basically, the idea is like, how do we break down big changes and let you review and like put changes up for review, and then keep developing on top of them while you do that. So you've kind of decoupled the review, review and development processes and let those go on in parallel. So the first chapter of Graphite was really like bringing that to every company on top of GitHub. Then I think you had a year and a half ago you had Sonnet 3.5 released. All of a sudden, everything changes as far as how software is built, and every team is adopting Cursor and Claude Code and these amazing tools. And I think it both made the problem that we were working on 10 times more important, and it gave us an incredible tool to go and solve it with AI. So the problem's 10 times more important because they're now 10 times more PRs in some cases. Like every engineer has a bunch of Claude Code windows open working simultaneously. Like you're able to build features like so much faster than ever before. But the result of that is that you just have a mountain of PRs piling up waiting for review. And we hear from a lot of our customers that many of their most senior engineers are now just buried in like mountains of PRs from junior folks that are just churning these out with AI tooling now. So we knew we wanted to solve, like our existing tooling helps teams solve that. We also knew that we needed to do more. So we created Graphite Agent, formerly called Diamond, which is our AI reviewer. The idea there was like, can we can we take a lot of the work that a human reviewer would do and just like hand that to AI, have it catch like many of the bugs and nits and style inconsistencies, follow custom rules, find security vulnerabilities. Like, can it do that first pass at code review and kind of shortcut that so that as an author of a PR, you get feedback in a few seconds, and then by the time you loop in a human colleague, like there's still a human in the loop, like checking that, but fundamentally, they're able to then look at for like higher order problems and not have to spend as much time like nitpicking and reading every single line of code necessarily. And that's exactly what we've done. Like Graphite Agent now, many of our top customers now have expanded to use Graphite Agent. I think the big change that we've made there is now bringing the chat functionality into the Graphite PR page. So you can actually now collaborate with Graphite Agent live on the pull request from Graphite. You can have it like update things for you. You can ask it questions. It can go into your code base and search for relevant context. Like it's much more of now making the PR a collaborative experience rather than just a point of validation. And I think that's super interesting for working with AI.
So as you review and as you kind of build in and you introduce this code reviewer, I'm curious first, just sort of understand a little bit more about the substance of what it does and doesn't review well. So I guess, what are the types of problems you've seen it most successful at dealing with? And maybe the other way around, like what are the gaps where you say, well, at the moment, I'm sure it gets better over time, but at the moment, it is its boundaries, its capabilities, boundaries.
I think the things that it's really good at, it's great at finding bugs and like any logic errors. It's very good. I think there's also, interestingly, we've seen there's a class of bug where it can be, it's hard for a human to spot, or where, the type checker wouldn't find it, where just like looking at it just with your eyes, you wouldn't necessarily spot it immediately. And I think, AI on the other hand is very good at finding those type of bugs and calling those out. So, we've seen that as like an interesting class of issues that AI is particularly good at finding. It's very good at style guide adherence. It's good at finding security vulnerabilities. It can pretty much do most of what like a human reviewer can do, at least at like that like first level of review, of like looking at the diff itself. And a couple things that it's not great at yet. One is like higher level architecture decisions. Like I think that's still very much in the realm of like you need to have like a senior engineer who's thinking about the entire system. I don't think we yet have. It's getting better certainly, but it's still. I don't think we yet have like the context to be able to do that. The other piece I'd say is. I think there's a really interesting opportunity, and something we're actively exploring is, can we validate that this change is actually doing what it's supposed to, like end to end, and is that the agent is spinning this up on a box and clicking through it and recording a video and adding that to the change, something like that. I think is an interesting direction for this to go. And then I'd say the other piece that's a little more difficult right now is. There's some languages that just aren't really well represented in AI training sets, and those end up being things that are more esoteric end up being like a bit more difficult for the reviewer to get right. For some reason, it's bad at Kotlin right now. We don't know why exactly, but that's something we keep getting whenever we're in mobile repos. We see that a lot.
So it sounds like the challenges are mostly on either sort of LLM limitations of the brain is still not good enough. Around it, and on, I guess, kind of breadth of context, like when you think about architecture or end-to-end testing for sure. But with the architecture, would you say that today's limits are more around kind of the reasoning capabilities? Like you can give it all the information about all of that context, and it's just kind of not smart enough yet to extract that out, or is it more of a product problem still of I just need to like bring all the relevant information to the hands of the LLM, but the intelligence is already there?
I think it's more the latter, where so much of this, like, I think the reasoning is there if you give it perfect information, but the challenge is that a lot of the considerations that go into like good architecture are, from so many like disparate sources of context that might be, in one engineer's head who built the system 2 years ago. Like, it might be in a Notion doc that's been lying dormant for a long time. Like, there's so many places where this is kind of fanned out in an organization, and tribal knowledge that it is. I think this is one of the things that we're working on is like, how do we bring all of those pieces of context and like provenance for a change into the PR, more so than ever before, and provide the agent with enough context to actually like think through the problem at that scale. But I do think that we're close, if not there already, as far as the capabilities of the model themselves, given the right information.
Yeah, that's interesting. Although it is interesting to think about whether the training data, connecting these two kind of gaps, the training data for what is good architecture is probably also kind of a bit more limited.
Fair.
So as you look at this, you've sort of had a stretch, you still do sort of see a bunch of human code and reviews. And now you're seeing a bunch of AI. So I guess kind of two related questions. One is, can you tell the two apart? I mean, does the system track those? I don't know if you have any sort of stats or sort of data around it, but in general, a perception around, the amount of AI code coming in. And importantly, like, are there like types of mistakes or sort of problems that you think are more kind of AI prevalent than human prevalent?
This is a challenge that I think a lot of the industry has right now, is that there isn't an agreed upon standard for storing in Git history, like what was this written by AI or not. Yeah. I think that'd be something that'd be very, very interesting. And at a high level, what we've seen is, engineers are generating or are changing about 70% more lines of code per week than what we saw at the end of 2023. So we think a lot of that is largely, should largely be attributable to AI. GitHub has published stats in the past about over half of the code on GitHub now being AI generated. I'm sure it's probably closer to 2/3 to 3/4 at this point, given the trend. I don't think we hit Dario's 90% by September projection, but I think the path to that, I think, is fairly clear. So we're seeing a lot more AI generated code. There's no way to really tell it apart at the moment, or especially for organizations with top tier engineering talent. Like, the quality does tend to be lower than the median engineer there. So yeah, exactly. I think there's some organizations, it's interesting because I think there's some organizations for which AI is now better than the median engineer. And I think for many of our customers though, that's decidedly not the case yet. And there's still very much a need for us to refine, to check and refine, particularly AI generated code.
You mentioned that it adheres to style guides and the likes. I'd love to talk a little bit about what is the source of truth that you kind of contrast the reviews against. What has been sort of effective in terms of defining kind of correctness and quality, and what's the experience for someone to input this? Who is it that is entering this gospel?
Yeah, so we've put a lot into letting customers customize the reviewer, add their own rules. So much of code review is this kind of store of institutional knowledge and style. And we have, so with Graphite Agent, you can define custom rules either in English, or you can give it regex that you wanted to look for around this, helping it to focus on particular types of issues. We have some
more common. Do people like the regex more because it's controlled, or do they like the sort of the
they like the English? Yeah, they like conventional language. We also will ingest. We'll look for if there's a Claude MD or cursor rules file. We'll ingest that and add that to context as well, just so that there's consistency there. This is another place where I think there's a lot of different standards that are evolving, and we basically just try to vacuum up as many of them as possible.
We have to add another one to rule them all.
We'll say actually in the comment if it was attributable to a particular rule, and we show insights as well in the product of which rules are triggering the most, and what we're catching and what we're not. So we try to have a good feedback loop there of things that we customization, and then seeing the impact of that in terms of the AI reviews.
Whose job is it to enter this data? Things like the Claude MD that you read from a repo, for instance, that is the repo's information, and presumably the app dev team that is working on that is building. But maybe the definition of what high quality code is or what secure code is and all of that, that is more some platform team's responsibility of it. I guess who configures the rules or the languages in Graphite?
It's usually like a developer productivity or developer infra team. They're usually the ones who are admins on the GitHub repo. They're configuring Graphite more generally for the organization. So at a large company like Shopify, we'll work really closely with that dev infra team and make sure that we're pulling in the right sources of context and setting up the right knowledge there. For smaller teams, though, it's much like on GitHub, like it's kind of a free for all. Like anybody can, many of them will set it so that like anybody can add a rule and anyone can update it. Which I think there's like something nice about that, where you just get like as many inputs as possible, and like you can kind of like converge on like the right set of rules much quicker. But obviously, for large organizations, it makes more sense to centralize it, and we want to support that as well.
So you're not alone in introducing a reviewer, and specifically a pull request reviewer, but clearly you've been around before. I would kind of posit to that Graphite's original success was very much around user experience. It was a methodology and kind of an ease, and you kind of nailed some of that sort of developer zeitgeist of this is an elegant way of working in a way that I guess we've come to appreciate, that it's hard to get simple things right and build those out. Now in the AI code review, there's a certain sense that, everything that you've described, if I was to kind of bring along, many other sort of code review builders, there will probably be a lot of repetition. What do you think makes a company stand out in this space? What makes it, not just whatever to use, the sort of the cliche lingo of it, just sort of a wrapper on top of the LLM?
Yeah, I think that there's obviously a lot of interest in the space right now. Like, we're certainly not the only ones who've recognized that the volume of AI generated code means that there will be a massive opportunity to like help teams like review it faster. I think the thing that differentiates us and what we believe is Graphite's like core advantage in this space is that we span the entire life cycle of the pull request. It's not just a bot that plugs into GitHub and comments in this one part of the life cycle. We're able to go, all the way from the moment the PR is created, of like, enhancing that with like, describing the change, generating a description for it, pulling in the right reviewers, doing the AI review certainly, but then helping the author iterate on that, helping reviewers like understand the change better, and walking reviewers through that as part of their review, helping to solve CI failures as they come up, and prompting the author to accept the change and rerun it, solving merge conflicts. Like, I think the view, and we're not quite there yet, but I think the view of Graphite Agent is that it really should be this, almost this like companion that's helping to shepherd your changes through all the different steps of the process. I'd say the other piece is that even on AI review, I don't think that we've really seen what the best modality here is. Like, for AI code generation, you've seen several very quick iterations on what that modality is. Like, you went from Copilot, which just had like autocomplete, to cursor tab, to cursor agent mode, to now like moving entirely away from interfaces that focus on the code and moving towards like just the prompt with Claude Code. And now we're seeing background agents. So, the way that you interact with these tools is evolving so rapidly. And I think like the bot that comments on GitHub to me is just the Copilot autocomplete V1. And there's still like several iterations of what AI code review looks like. And, I think there's something nice about it, and that like it meets users where they are. I think it is the right logical starting point here, but I think it's still so early in terms of pushing the boundaries of what this review experience should look like in an AI native world. And that's part of why we with bringing the Graphite Agent chat into the pull request page, like I think that is our belief of like, what does the next step here look like? Can it be not just a static reviewer that's like asynchronously leaving comments, but rather like a real companion that you're building with that's like helping you get the PR ready and like iterate on it live from the PR page. And I think that's why a lot of customers are really excited about it. That's why we're really thrilled to get that out.
So in this context now, you can interact with the LLMs through Graphite. You can interact with the Graphite agent to edit the code within the PR. And you've sort of seen a bunch of Claude and others introduce maybe review elements, and you're kind of encroaching into that space. I guess how do you see this playing out with all the caveats? And as you described, this is all it's all theory because we don't really know. But still, how do you see the boundaries or the right scope of a product? Does it need to be a single product that does kind of the whole agentic perspective? Like, is it eventually someone's using Graphite, they will be using that for sort of their end-to-end development, and Cloud Code or a Devin or such will not be part of their flow? Or do you think there's a specific slice, a specific realm of responsibility that you think will be distinct? Because it definitely feels like a massive blurring of the lines.
Yeah, I think it is. It's rapidly. One thing I'll say is like it's very hard to know where this will go, and also like part of this is what. In the next week, it does. It feels like it changes. It does change on like a weekly basis, but there's also an interesting. I think we've seen like different levels of interest from the base model providers. I think at one point it looked like Anthropic was going to focus entirely on just code generation, and OpenAI was going to go full consumer. And now OpenAI has kind of gone back the other direction and said like, no, we actually want to own everything, which is like kind of cool and like ambitious of them to go that direction. But I think there is this question of like, to what extent do the base model providers like remain base model providers, or do they continue to go like up stack and own more of the application layer? My belief there is that they, at least so far, they mostly they will only own applications insofar as it feeds back training data to them. So I think that's kind of the logical boundary for some of those for base models is like, what is like the minimum scope needed to get good training data back so they can RL. So I think for us, our view is that we'll likely have a lot of competition among who is generating the code, even who is providing like the review agents. I could see a world where Graphite isn't necessarily like building a first party review agent if others get good enough. Like our goal is very much to be like the interface layer and the place where the best place to interact with and control many different agents on working on your code changes. So we think the winning platform. I think there will be opportunities to build the best in class agents for each task in the software development lifecycle. I also think then there's another opportunity to be the control plane for all of those agents, and that is really where I think we see the most opportunity. In some of these cases, like with AI review, I think you have to build the agent because there aren't good opportunity, like aren't good alternatives out there. But like as for instance, we don't really, there's a ton of companies doing like background agents for code generation. We're not super interested in getting into building like a Graphite like code gen agent. Like we would much rather be like the place where you prompt your agents, they go off, create PRs for you, hand you back, you review them in Graphite, you merge them in Graphite. Like that entire create, review, merge process all happens from our control plane.
I'm interpreting what you're saying as more of the user experience, and maybe that sort of core element of
yes.
Of what you started Graphite with is where you feel that there's an opportunity to kind of orchestrate this activity.
Yeah.
And I guess to challenge like stepping out of that a little bit, it feels to me, and feel free to sort of call me an idiot on this, but that like the stacked PRs, for instance, that you started with, in sort of the human review reality, still are very necessary because you're working on something big and you publish this sort of piece of work so that humans can review it. If AI is doing the review, I think I would want to consume that review as part of my ongoing development, as opposed to wait until I publish a PR. Maybe it even like reduces the value of that stacked PR, because the AI is already reviewing it over, as I build. But even for that first bit, like why, when you have review and the review is done by AI, why do I need to wait until I open the pull request? Why is that point in time needed for the AI review? I get why it's needed for the human review, but why for the AI review?
We're going to jump into the second half of our conversation, but first, a quick shout out to AI Native DevCon. 2 days of hands-on sessions, deep dives, and honest conversations about what it means to build AI native software, November 18th and 19th in New York, or join virtually from anywhere. Tickets and details at ainativedev.io/devcon. See you there.
I'd say a couple of things. Like one, I would challenge the assumption that stacked PRs are less valuable in a world where AI is generating the code, because I think if anything, what we've seen is that, especially for like background agents, if you just kind of let them run wild, the result is you get, multi-thousand line, unintelligible PRs. And, certainly there are things that we can do on the PR interface itself to like guide you through the change and help you understand it. But I think fundamentally, especially as you're building with multiple agents, or as you're having these agents do longer, autonomous tracks of work, I think that it will be increasingly important to have those changes be understandable and digestible by the humans that need to check it. So we built the Graphite MCP. We have a lot of our customers are now actually having their agents create stacked PRs precisely because it makes them easier to review on the other side.
Yeah, that's actually super interesting, and I can totally relate, which is the agents, when they do a long work, if you think of stacked PR as a way for you to continue working while you are submitting stuff to review, it's kind of the core of it. Actually, these sort of agents are a great example of that, because they don't want to wait, and you want to be able to review their work incrementally. And I guess probably there will be interfaces of, once they did submit something, if there was substantial correction in the review, they might kind of revert back to that point and continue the work from there, which is something that humans will probably be quite annoyed at doing.
Exactly. And I think the revertibility piece is another good point there, of like having smaller pieces and like a clear history, I think enables you to like more easily figure out like what was the change that introduced this problem, like lets you roll back more precisely. Like there's a lot of benefits there to having your agents work in smaller pieces, and stacking is like a fantastic workflow to enable them to do that. The second point that I wanted to make, though, was that I think a lot of folks that really kind of get stuck on the idea of like code review being the only value of code review being this validation step. And I think that's certainly one of the main benefits of it. But I think the other piece, the other two pieces I'd say that are often missed of this is that I think code review is also super important in sharing knowledge across the team, of helping other engineers understand like what is actually going out to production, what is changing. It's also a great moment of teaching where you get a lot of feedback, and you're able to like improve the way that you're approaching your projects. So those two, certainly there's like the validation quality piece. I think AI can take on, but I think the latter two are actually more important than ever in many ways, because you have now, if even the engineer who's like authoring the PR doesn't fully understand the change, like I think it's all the more important that you have a moment to where you walk through everything, and you can clearly communicate like what is changing in the code base. Similarly, I think having sharing that with others, teaching others like what is good about this change and what is not, like what learnings they want to apply, and also having a moment then to like feed any like systemic things back into the reviewer, and give it more rules for the future of what it should or shouldn't look at. Like that piece is really important. So I think that those, certainly the validation, the purpose of code review, I think will shift of human review at least, like will shift from validation, more to the like, pedagogy and knowledge sharing pieces. But I do think that those two are fundamentally, I think arguably more important in terms of like why we do code review today than the validation pieces anyways.
Yeah, interesting. So I guess you're describing a reality in which maybe the I guess the code review that is fully automated, you might eventually want to consume that as a natural part of the agentic development. It's a point in time in which it is done in a different system and needs to come back to you. That's maybe a hiccup. Maybe they call into Graphite through that MCP, not just to open the pull request, but to actually run the review and kind of get the results. But then I guess you mentioned two things that are maybe long-term relevant. One is the notion of a stacked PR, even if it is, whether it is or isn't reviewed incrementally, just as a means of demarcation of different points in time. And second is, as a means of review of work that's been done to be able to get guidance, and to provide guidance, on what's there, sort of learn and guide the AI. And I guess in that context, you probably would, at some point, would have to veer away from reviewing the code and reviewing some analysis of the code, right? Because it's just it's an unpleasant future to imagine, one in which all we do is read code and review and kind of comment and nitpick on it. Does that sound about right? Like you're going to need some sort of summaries or sort of reviews of the changes. Is that a likely future?
Yeah. I mean, I think the framework that we talk about internally here is that I think we see three steps in the process and like the evolution of engineering and code review as a product of that. Like the first step, which I think we're somewhat moving past already, is one where the IC engineer is primarily the one like writing the code or generating it with tab complete, and then review is very much like a process of looking at every single line of code, like really carefully inspecting it. I think the second phase that we're now entering or have entered is one where the job of engineering feels more like an engineering manager, where you're working with and orchestrating like a team of agents that are going and building. They're handing you back changes. You're certainly reviewing the code, but a lot of it is like reviewing the design docs and the architecture and kind of the higher level points. Still being able to introspect into the code, but a lot of that is happening of the review, and like what you're looking for is happening at a higher level of abstraction. The details there are starting to be handled more by AI review in that world. And then I'd say the third level, which we have not gotten to yet, but I think we will start to see if everything gets gets good enough, is one where I'd say that it almost looks more like working with an external dev agency would be, where you're giving just high level specs, and then you're getting back like the artifact of the finished product, and you're reviewing that, versus you may not even ever necessarily look at the underlying code or need to understand it, but you're primarily reviewing like whatever that finished product is. And I think we're somewhere between like phases 1 and 2 right now, and then I think in the coming years we have the opportunity to jump from 2 to 3. Yeah,
and clearly we're sort of quite aligned in terms of the sort of spec-driven development.
Yeah, you guys think about this a lot.
It's about that. And I guess the question here would be, review is an after the fact kind of reality, right? You're looking at the output and you're saying, well, is the output sort of proper? And to an extent, the more you've defined upfront, the less you need to review, or at least the review becomes a bit more straightforward, which is, did you adhere to the specification? And so I think that's a future, but I agree that it's a journey, and at the moment it's there. And to an extent, my question about what is the source of truth is a bit about that, right? It is about what's the spec assisted review that you have there to tell you what's correct, whether it's a Claude MD or a style guide. And I think it's interesting to think about how that gets managed as well within an organization.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot there in terms of connecting back to what I was saying earlier around like how do we start to show the chat history or like the prompts, the agent logs, like in the pull request. How do we pull in the right provenance and context around like where was the spec, like where was the Figma design file, what was like the intention of this change, and capturing that more completely than I think just a PR description today. Today just isn't sufficient anymore. If we want agents to be able to do like a really high quality review, even for humans, I think that there is like that level of subjectivity about review today that would really benefit from having more context. And I think I'm curious. I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about how you think about it. Like, how do you kind of most completely capture the spec of like what was the intention of a change, and and then turn that into something that can then be digestible by either an AI reviewer or a human on the other side of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly kind of flipping roles here a little bit on it, but yeah, clearly there's an evolution there to sort of think about, how do you create a spec? How do you read it? What does a spec even contain? You referred now to sort of the spec of a change, of going from state A to state B. We think a lot as well about long-lived specs, not just the task at hand, but rather some document that captures some long-lived definition of either what you're building or how you want to build, and then how do you adhere to that? One thing that's sort of quite interesting, and I don't know if you've encountered it. Well, I guess in your case, you're running your own agent, so you're fine. But because we connect to different agents, we find that the same guidance that you want to provide would get very different adherence. You might have one state-of-the-art agent, take some instruction and follow it 80% of the time, and another follow it 30% of the time. And it might just be a wording difference. Sonnet 4.5 requires very different prompting than 4, as was GPT-5 and when it came out versus the predecessors. And so I think the notion of how do you manage this knowledge and the source of truth is interesting. And we need visibility, we need observability, which I guess again it comes back. For us, I'm a bit of a broken record there. We talk about spec-driven development as a new development paradigm over time, but the transition period is an interesting one, as it's still quite impactful. And I think review is at a clearly very important place there, and we need to see what is being reviewed. Like, there would always be a need to review, but what is being reviewed? I want to shift to talk a little bit about the business and the kind of the startup side maybe of the company. Sure. Then want to close off on some futures. So a common debate today in sort of startup land, specifically in developer land, is just the pricing model, right? You are today. I believe you're sort of still a sort of a seat based primarily. How many developers are using this? Which makes sense. You're collaborating on it. You're going to have a lot of AI workers. I don't know if they're going to purchase a seat. I guess, how do you think about what's the right long-term kind of value attribution, right, or pricing model for products like yours?
Yeah, there's certainly a big shift happening right now and across industries on collaborative tooling, where historically it made sense to price per seat. I think I think that is still like largely what buyers are anchored to. And we've certainly been exploring like what would a usage-based model look like, if we charge by PR volume or by PRs reviewed, like lines of code, something. There are different like parameters we could use there, but I think the challenge there is like, what's the right time to innovate, and like is pricing the thing that we want to spend our innovation points on, and if so, like when do we want to lead the market in doing that? And I think that for now, certainly, per seat is still very much the model, the paradigm that we're operating in. I see over the next year, especially as teams start to, as companies start to like, change the way that they think about scaling their teams, and maybe not hire as many engineers as they scale, and shift more towards like relying on background agents for those workloads. The type of thing that would make us like more seriously consider moving over to usage based. I think that will be the end state here. It's more a matter of like, when is the right time to pull that lever.
Yeah, I do think that it's super interesting to see how things play out. With the sneak hat on, thinking about sort of security, it's similar. We secure the work of developers, and so the more developers you have contributing, the more it makes sense to charge. And when you think about outcome-based pricing and a lot of that sort of aspiration in this world, you can say, well, fine, maybe we do, for every vulnerability fixed, But then you get into the conversation of like, what's a vulnerability and was it vulnerable? No, what's an extreme? So it gets very hairy. I think there's a world of learning there. If you switch to utility-based pricing and you charge by scan, you are potentially incentivizing the wrong behavior because people will want to scan less. I imagine there will be some sort of similarity of like the number of reviews is a tricky proposition for you.
Right. I think there are kind of two competing factors there. Like on the one hand, as you say, we don't want to disincentivize the thing that we believe our users should be doing more of. Like we want users to create more PRs. We want them to stack. Like we don't want that to be, we don't want you to feel like, oh, you're now paying more because you're doing the thing that Graphite told you to do. At the same time, though, I think that there's, Gokul Rajaram, one of our investors, and a great product mentor of mine from the Square days, he has like a great blog post on this of like how Google thought about like charging, why they charge for impressions and not for, conversions or click-throughs even, and that being, because you want to charge for things that are under your control as the business. Like, if somebody makes shitty ad copy, it's not on Google whether or not you actually like click through to the site or not. Like Google's job is just to serve you the ad in the first place. And I think about a similar thing here where, even like completion, it's like, what is the definition of completion? Like, if you expose yourself to too much subjectivity and variability on the user input side, like then all of a sudden your pricing just becomes like, really hard to model, hard to reason about, or like hard to really rely on, versus like keeping it as something that's like fundamentally under your control.
I find it a little bit funny how so many things get emphasized with AI, and one of them is the measure of developer productivity. Because really what you want to say, hey, I'm going to charge by the amount of productivity I've provided to you. Yep. If only we could measure what that actually means. Merrill, thanks for all the great insights. I want to finish off with just a bit of futures of it. So for starters, you touched on this a little bit, but what is it that you think is the role of a developer in the future? I'm talking about someone who does it for a living, if you think that exists. If you try to cast your eyes far, like 5 years, or like maybe even 10, what do you think is the role of a developer? What does it look like?
It really is like becomes one of defining like at a high level, like what the experience should be, to some extent, like what are like the technologies that should be used, like what are the problems, like the hard problems that need to be solved, and then like I think it is working collaboratively with agents to go ahead and find the best solution to them, to iterate on that, and to and then to like get that out to your end customers, and that it looks more. I think it does look like more like review, or more like you're operating at a higher level of abstraction than code today. But I still think that you need to be able to like dive deep into the code in some cases and know kind of what approaches to use at the right time. Some of that will be like the agents will be informing you of this. Sometimes you'll be informing them. Like much like a collaborative team works today. Like not everyone on your team knows everything or has the right answer to every problem. But together with your human and agent colleagues, you'll figure out the right solution.
I guess just to sort of poke on that a little bit, if you spend most of your time at a higher level, like would you not lose, or maybe in some cases never acquire the skills to be able to review the code? I mean, don't we need to kind of find a way to not have that kind of uncanny valley, like it can nearly code, but not quite, and solve that with other tools?
I think this is like a great debate, right? Because I think, a lot of us don't really understand, like, a lot of us like don't have to understand like compilers today, or like, you don't need to like get down to, be able to look at like machine code and understand it. Exactly. Like, we have like jumped up levels of abstraction before successfully. Difference there is that those are more deterministic, like far more deterministic than what we're dealing with now. But I do think that there is, that we have been able to navigate those changes in the past. I still think that there is there is like fundamentally a reason why we learn those things, and even if we don't then use them in our day to day as engineers. Like I think that there is value in learning that, and that's certainly something that I'm curious to see the result of. Every like CS graduate having access to Cursor now, versus a few years ago. Like I think there's a bull case there of like it makes everyone far more productive and able to like learn faster and build things faster and get more excited about the field. I also think that there's potentially a challenge coming of like not of like a whole class of like new grad engineers like not necessarily having having the skills and knowledge that they need to like be able to jump down a layer of abstraction anymore.
Yeah, and that's actually precisely sort of the last question I had for you, which is if you had an 18-year-old child right now and they were considering whether or not to go into a CS degree in university, would you recommend they do or they don't?
I still think I would. I would just say that they're basically two angles that I'd say you should go. It's either you go super deep on it and say you want to become an expert in like a deep technology, something that just requires that will take a long time for AI to, and require a lot of specialized knowledge. It'll take a long time for AI to catch up to. Or the other side of it is like go wide and develop design skills, develop business skills and product, and have like a breadth of of influences and of abilities there, such that you can better inform the agent of what to build. And that piece, I think we talk about like does like product and design and eng kind of all merge together in some not so distant future. Like I think there is some world where the role of engineers is either it's either going to get like much broader in some cases and like much deeper in others, but the in between of like just kind of existing in the scope that we have before, I think is not going to last very long.
I love the perspective, like just sort of pick your battle, but the T-shape might be a little bit tricky.
Yes.
In this world, Merrill, thanks a lot for all the great insights, and good luck reviewing and kind of evolving review with the Graphite.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this. Thanks for having me, Guy.
And thanks everybody for tuning in, and I hope you join us for the next one.